Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading update for Friday, August 7th, 2020. This is my first Friday reads of the month, so in my usual fashion, I will first briefly allude to my July literary newsletter. Every month I put together a literary newsletter where I compile news stories about the bookish world that caught my fancy. I also have a book pick that I have on my Instagram, a TBR of books I want to read and found this month, and a book meme, and then also the snippets from my Goodreads reviews of all of the books that I read in July. So I'll link that down below. So I don't want to take too much time here to talk about July reading anymore, except for one book, which I technically finished in August anyway. It's this one, PIRKEI, IMAHOT, The Wisdom of the Mothers, The Voices of Women. It's a workbook by Rabbi Posen and Lois, Sussman, Shenker, and it's women looking over the seminal Jewish text PIRKEI Avot, The Wisdom of the Fathers, and then giving their thoughts, and also providing space for other noted female leaders of today to give their thoughts on basically how to live an ethical life, because that's the purpose of the ancient book and what they're trying to do here. Anyway, the big thing about this book is that I most recently highlighted it in my mid-year book freakout check-in tag as the book I had to get to this year, because I meant to start it last year and never got to it because the workshop parts, freaked me out. Like, all the time I'd have to put into filling out the workbook parts. But I have filled them out. Not sure you can see my horrible handwriting in some of these pages. And now this book is done! Okay, well, other than that, I've had a kind of slow reading week. I just finished this book. This is The German Girl by Armando Correa, and it is a translated book, translated from the Spanish by Nick Caistor. I read this book for the book club that my mother started with me and my aunties, be they, biological or otherwise. This is the third book we've read. It's the third book I feel iffy about. In fact, I feel the most iffy about this book. This is a Holocaust-era fiction book, I believe somewhat inspired by Correa's actual family. It starts in Germany in the late 30s. We're following the protagonist, Hannah, who's an 11-year-old girl, a German Jewish girl, when things are, starting to get very tense in Germany for the Jews. Her parents ultimately are able to buy passage on the St. Louis. The St. Louis was a ship that set off from Hamburg and was supposed to deliver almost 950 German Jewish refugees to safety in Cuba, except shortly before they arrived, the Cuban president reneged, only allowed a couple of people to disembark, about 28 refugees. The rest were denied entry in the US and Canada. Hannah and her mother are two of the people allowed to disembark in Cuba while her father is sent back. And then there's a second storyline with a protagonist named Anna, who's about 11 years old in 2014, or maybe 12 years old. And she was actually born shortly after September 11th, and her father was declared missing, a missing person in the September 11th tragedy. So she has been growing up with her mother, who's just kind of been lethargic and, not embracing any sort of life for all of these years until they get some correspondence from Hannah, and it turns out that they're related and that Anna's father is Hannah's nephew. And so they go to Cuba to basically find out their family history. What I don't like about this book is that it's incredibly exposition heavy, and I don't think nearly enough attention is given to fleshing out the characters or the situations that they're in. A lot of it is very paint by numbers sort of historical fiction in the background. I think part of that is on purpose. A major impetus of Hannah's life and her mother's life is that they always feel unwanted in Cuba. They never wanted to be in Cuba in the first place. They never really identify at all with Cuba, even though they live there for most of their lives. So Cuban current events as they happen throughout the rest of their lives is kind of on a backdrop for them. Kind of. But they do actually have another member of the family, Gustav, who is Anna's grandfather. Gustav was born shortly after they arrived in Cuba, and he is much more, in line with his adopted country and the growing revolution and that sort of thing. And we learn about this through all of these exposition-heavy chapters where it's like Hannah's narrating her life from a great distance, and we get no true sense of the character relationships between anyone. None of the characters feel like real people. They just feel like, parts of a report. Most of the emotional gravitas takes place in Berlin and on the St. Louis, which is perhaps understandable because that's when the characters felt most alive. And while I'm at it, the secondary storyline with Anna in 2014 is a huge letdown. She's not a character in her own right. She has nothing going on in her personal life at all. It is all just hearkening back to the past. She is just a repository for Hannah to say that we have a future or something like that. I mean, really, the 2014 storyline didn't really have to exist. But anyway, the most emotional gravitas, as I said, happened, in Berlin and on the St. Louis. I really did enjoy learning more about what it was like on the St. Louis for the passengers as they traveled to Cuba. I mean, it was a luxury ship. A lot of wealthier people who nevertheless gave up everything to get on the ship were able to have a rather comfortable journey there. I found that to be interesting and kind of less well known to me in terms of what I know about the Holocaust. The stuff in Berlin was paint by the numbers. I've read a lot of Holocaust fiction, a lot that's taken place in Germany leading up to the war, told by German Jews, so there was really not much new there at all. Even though we spent the most concentrated time there, narrating, every chapter would be like a day in the life of or something, whereas once they get to Cuba, every chapter, which is only 5 or 2 pages long, narrates years or decades in a life. And it just didn't work for me. Not as fiction. I think the Millions said that Correa, who is in fact a journalist, should have done nonfiction with this. I think he really wanted to bring attention to the St. Louis, especially since Cuba still refuses to acknowledge what happened. But in terms of seeing this, broad swath of history, starting, in 1939 in Berlin and ending in 2014 in Cuba, it's a lot of time. Regarding seeing it through a fictional lens with characters who feel fully three-dimensional, this just didn't work. There just wasn't any of that there. So anyway, I was going to discuss this book in detail with my book club on Sunday, but we had to push back the meeting a week. I guess I'll see what everyone else has to say, but honestly, I really feel like this one was at the bottom of the barrel. So, not a good start of the month with translated fiction by men. But maybe I'll have better luck with translated fiction by women. Next on my docket is Been Here 1,000 Years by Mariolina, Venezia, translated from the Italian by Marina, Harss. I'm reading this book because it's at the top of my Goodreads list, meaning it's been on the list for TBR for years. And also, August is Women in Translation Month, started by activists who realize that very little fiction by women has been translated into English and wanting to do something about that. So they started this Women in Translation Month. Over on BookTube, a couple of people are having a readathon based on this premise. I'll link to Matthew Sharapa's video about it down below. But for me, I have plenty of my own reading projects on my plate, so I'm just going to read this book for Women in Translation Month, and I will tease you about it with what's written on the flap. In a tiny ancient Italian hill town where the land gives little and money and food are scarce, Don Francesco Falcone is a man to be reckoned with, rich, powerful, restless, intransigent. When he meets another force of nature, Concetta, a penniless but indestructible farm worker, the stage is set for the creation of an exceptional family. generations of strong, complicated boys and even stronger and more complicated girls. The battles between them are many as they live through historical upheaval and private passions. Their stories are told by Giulia, the last of the line of women of our times who fights against conventions. She is the product of a family of memorable women who know how to survive and know how to make something fantastical and rich out of their lives. With their hands, they create delicate and complex embroideries, while their minds embroider endless, elaborate stories. In this sweeping, unforgettable novel, Mariolina Venezia portrays 5 generations of the Falcone family. Through their complicated, funny, tragic, and astonishing stories, she recounts a century and a half of Italy's tumultuous history. Been Here 1,000 Years is a testament to the Falcone family and also to the vibrant, irrational, irresistible country that produced it. So yeah, I'm already on board, even if this language is a little too lush, but there's talk of complicated characters in here, and that's what I want to see. So anyway, I hope to be back later this week, and I'm going to do a completely separate book review just for this book for Women in Translation Month, so stay tuned. And that about covers it for me now. You know, I feel a little bit guilty, I do, about the German girl, and I wonder if I judged it too harshly. Admittedly, I have been relatively distracted this week. This week has been an incredibly busy week, at least in terms of coronavirus weeks. A couple of weeks ago, I had an administrative hearing about some red tape unemployment compensation issues, and I finally got the final order from the judge to, hopefully set things right at last. But also, my work has been in contact. Not because the library is opened and my furlough has ended. I still have no idea when that's going to happen. But they're bidding on a new contract, and I might have a new temporary assignment soon. Maybe. I mean, again, I have no idea when I'll be allowed to return to work as it is. This whole thing has just been so incredibly surreal. But it does sort of seem like the end of my furlough might be a possibility soon. So amidst all of this other chatter, I suddenly got a huge hankering to sit down and start submitting my short stories to a bunch of places, because I figure once I go back to work, and especially if I'm working a new job, I won't have as much brain power for that. And I want to say that I got something productive and personally meaningful done for me during this crazy furlough time. Of course, most of what I've been doing is meticulously researching a cajillion literary magazines and then freaking out about how difficult it is to get published at all. But amidst that, I did send out a few submissions, and you just gotta keep hoping for the best. So yeah, that's how my week is going. Hope yours are going well in these crazy times. I'm especially thinking of those, to the north of me who were affected by the recent hurricane. Here in the DC area, we've gotten a fair amount of rain, but nothing too drastic, so that's good for me, but hoping everyone else can stay safe. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.